A crushing defeat for Justin Baldoni. A judge threw out his entire $400 million countersuit against Blake, Ryan Reynolds, and their publicist, and dismissed the separate $250 million defamation suit against the New York Times.
The judge has dismissed altogether the $400 million defamation lawsuit filed by director Justin Baldoni against Hollywood power couple Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. The backstory: Lively had initially filed a civil lawsuit against Baldoni, claiming that while working on the film It Ends With Us.
Breaking news: a federal judge in New York dismisses Justin Baldoni's lawsuit against Blake Lively. Now It Ends With Us director and star filed that $400 million lawsuit against Lively, her husband Ryan Reynolds, and their publicist, alleging extortion and defamation.
This isn't my night.
Blake took to Instagram thanking those who stood by her, adding, quote, "While the suit against me was defeated, so many don't have the resources to fight back."
You gotta stop. You have to stop this.
Baldoni sexually harassed her. She claims that when she spoke up, Baldoni's team, in retaliation, orchestrated a smear campaign to ruin her reputation. Baldoni denied all of her claims and later filed this defamation suit, which was just dismissed today.
And defamation, Lively's attorneys just said in a statement, today's opinion is a total victory and a complete vindication for Blake Lively, along with those that Justin Baldoni and the Wayfarer parties dragged into their retaliatory lawsuit, including Ryan Reynolds. Let's bring in our Jacqueline Lee out of LA. She's tracking it.
Anytime you write something in a lawsuit, you can never get sued for defamation. And what the court is saying here is that all of the alleged defamatory statements that Lively made came from that filing. There were no other statements outside of that document that allegedly she had said. Whether or not Blake has the upper hand with her case based on this dismissal, not necessarily.
So how did Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds react to hearing that the defamation suit against her and her husband has just been dismissed?
It's a day of vindication, Jake, and thanks for having me, by the way. They're vindicated. They are gratified. They are grateful to the individuals and organizations that have stood by Miss Lively as she's pursued these claims, and they are determined. Ms. Lively is determined to see her claims through, which are not dismissed, and will go on to a trial that's set for next year.
Baldoni and his studio Wayfarer claimed that Lively, assisted by her husband Ryan Reynolds and Leslie Sloan, her publicist, stole the film from him, threatened to refuse to promote the film, and then threatened to attack Baldoni and Wayfarer in the press if Blake Lively did not get creative control over the film.
Welcome back, you guys, and today we seriously need to talk about what just happened, because Justin Baldoni quietly dropping his $400 million lawsuit has everyone absolutely stunned. I mean, after months of court drama, accusations, subpoenas, and even talk about Blake Lively using a shell company to get access to private phone data, this is the turn no one saw coming. So what is really going on behind the scenes here? Because yeah, on the surface it might look like Baldoni just gave up. But the deeper you go, the more it looks like a calculated legal move. Some are even calling it a tactical retreat, not a defeat. And when you combine that with the fact that Blake might now be forced to hand over private messages she exchanged with Taylor Swift, yeah, the timing of all this feels a little too perfect. And if you thought that was it, nope. Stephanie Jones, Blake's longtime PR ally, is now trying to legally unmask the people running expose pages about her online.
So as a result of that claim, Baldoni and Wayfarer claimed this was civil extortion. The judge decided, nope, we're throwing this out. The judge saying any alleged actions don't constitute civil extortion. The judge saying California law of civil extortion is when a plaintiff gives a defendant money or property under threat and tries to get it returned. So the court actually said what Lively did was legally permissible hard bargaining or renegotiation of working conditions.
She thinks it's all part of a smear campaign by Baldoni's side, while critics say she's just trying to silence whistleblowers. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit, because this whole legal drama didn't just start yesterday. It's layered, it's messy, and honestly, it's kind of wild. From the moment Blake Lively allegedly used her shell company, Van Zandt Inc., to file a shady lawsuit with no named defendant, just to subpoena sensitive data, to the way Jen Abel's stolen phone became a central piece of evidence that somehow no one's supposed to talk about, this case has had twists on twists. And now that Justin has pulled back his countersuit, people are wondering, is Blake about to win? Or is this just the calm before a much bigger storm? Let's break down how we even got here, because once you see the full picture, this entire situation goes from bizarre to almost diabolical. So let's go back to where the fire really started, Justin Baldoni's lawsuit. In early 2025, he filed what was easily one of the most talked about legal cases in Hollywood, a $400 million defamation countersuit against Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Stephanie Jones, and a few others tied to the PR chaos that surrounded the filming of It Ends With Us. And this wasn't just some surface-level legal tiff. Justin claimed that there was a full-on character takedown operation happening behind the scenes. He accused Blake and her team of orchestrating a whisper network, basically using back channels, planted stories, and private communications to paint him as the villain. The lawsuit even said Stephanie Jones, a major Hollywood publicist, was passing along private, possibly stolen information from Baldoni's ex-PR exec Jen Abel's phone.
So that's why that got thrown out. The next aspect of Justin's lawsuit was the defamation aspect, saying that Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and the publicist defamed him.
Yeah, you heard that right. A phone that was supposedly obtained without proper consent. Now, what made this whole thing even crazier is that the allegations weren't just about celebrity gossip or rumors. Justin's legal filing called it out as a calculated move to destroy his professional reputation, scare off brands, and make him radioactive in the industry. He said it was all retaliation after he raised concerns about how things were being handled on set, and that ever since, the spin machine had been working overtime to bury him. And of course, Blake's team clapped back hard. They said the entire lawsuit was nothing but a distraction, a media stunt, and accused Justin and his allies of doing the exact same thing they were being accused of, spinning a narrative for sympathy while ignoring the real facts. But here's the thing, this wasn't just a celebrity spat. This was legal warfare, with documents flying back and forth, sealed subpoenas, protective orders, and media leaks that looked like chess moves. It was all playing out in courtrooms and headlines at the same time. And as this legal back and forth continued, people began to notice something strange, especially when a mysterious shell company suddenly popped up in the middle of it all, a company linked directly to Blake Lively. And yeah, what happened next? That's when things got really shady. All right, so let's talk about the plot twist that made everyone do a double take, Blake Lively and the shell company. This part of the story blew the whole thing wide open, because it wasn't just a regular back-and-forth legal battle anymore. Now it looked like someone was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. So in September 2024, out of nowhere, this company called Van Zan Incorporated filed a lawsuit in New York. No public fanfare, no big press announcement, and get this, no named defendant.
The judge said, based on the facts presented, Ryan and the publicist thought they were true based on the information available to them. So the defamation part got thrown out. Now to the New York Times aspect of this lawsuit. Wayfair and Baldoni claimed defamation against the New York Times for that viral article called "We Can Bury Anyone" inside a Hollywood smear campaign.
Yeah, it was literally a lawsuit filed against no one weird, right? But here's where it gets wild. Van Zan Inc. wasn't just any random company, it was a shell corporation directly tied to Blake Lively. The attorneys for Van Zan, same law firm repping Blake. So essentially, Blake was filing legal action against no one, through her own company, using her own lawyers. People started saying she was basically talking to herself in court filings. And what did Van Zan actually do with that lawsuit? It served a subpoena to Stephanie Jones and her PR firm, Jones Works, demanding access to the full contents of Jen Abel's phone. Yep, the same phone that Jen says was taken from her after she was let go, and the same phone that allegedly had tons of private communications, screenshots, voice notes, and more. Now, here's the kicker. Jen Abel was never notified. She wasn't involved in that case, wasn't a party to it, and yet her personal data was being subpoenaed and used in secret. And when Jen tried to get access to those files, Van Zan, aka Blake's shell company, blocked her using a protective order. So basically, we have your stuff, but you're not allowed to use it. Legal experts started raising eyebrows fast. People were calling it a legal shell game, a strategy to get evidence without triggering normal legal procedures. And Blake's team insisted it was all above board, that everything was handled properly. But from the outside, it looked calculated, secretive, and more than a little shady. And as people started digging into what was really happening with that subpoena, the whole protective order strategy made a lot more sense. But we'll get to that, because the next part is where things start getting even messier. Okay, so now we're in the thick of it. Jen Abel realizes that her private phone data has been accessed and possibly handed off.
The judge wrote, "The alleged facts indicate the Times reviewed the available evidence and reported, perhaps in a dramatized manner, what it believed to have happened. The Times had no obvious motive to favor Lively's version of events." So, Kira, the judge threw that out as well. So this is obviously delivering a huge blow to Justin Baldoni.
All without her knowledge. And naturally, she wants to know what exactly was taken, how it was used, and why nobody told her. So she goes to court and files a motion to get access to the materials pulled by Van Zandt Inc. during that shady New York case. But here's the problem. Blake's team had already slapped a protective order on the subpoenaed content. And not just any basic confidentiality agreement, we're talking about an airtight, multi-layered gag order with NDA-level restrictions. The kind where if you even admit you've seen certain documents, you could be in contempt of court. Basically, it was a legal lockbox. Blake's side told the court, yeah, we gave her the discovery materials already, but she can't use them, can't talk about them, and definitely can't introduce them in her own case. Like, what? That's the definition of giving someone a key and then welding the door shut. And, to make things even murkier, they accused Jen of weaponizing the court system just to gain PR traction. In their official court filing, they literally said Jen and her team were using the lawsuit to fuel a negative media campaign against Blake Lively. They called it a stunt, but critics pushed back hard, saying this wasn't a stunt, it was a cover-up. Meanwhile, Blake's lawyers kept insisting that everything was by the book, that Van Zandt had already cooperated more than they needed to, and that Jen's motion should be denied because, quote, she already has the documents. But again, having access and being legally allowed to use them are two totally different things. Legal watchers started calling this one of the most convoluted discovery fights they'd ever seen. On paper, it looked like Blake had all the power. She controlled the company that filed the subpoena, she controlled the legal team on both sides, and now she controlled the narrative around what evidence could be seen. And right when it looked like Blake had locked the whole thing down, the court made a move that turned heads across the internet. They ruled that Justin Baldoni's team could gain access to private messages between Blake and Taylor Swift. Yeah.
In suing Baldoni for sexual harassment, for retaliation, she has to prove those claims, and that's not going to be easy.
That's where things really start heating up. So here's where things go from complicated to full-blown explosive. Because out of nowhere, the court ruled that Justin Baldoni's legal team could access private text messages between Blake Lively and Taylor Swift. And yeah, you better believe that caught everyone's attention, fans, legal experts, and Swifties alike. Now let's be clear. This isn't about Taylor being sued or anything like that. She's not on trial here. But her name keeps popping up in court filings, and apparently, the messages between her and Blake could directly tie into Blake's legal strategy. In other words, Taylor might have known about the retaliation plan, or at the very least, Blake might have shared insider info with her, stuff that would now be considered relevant to discovery. And this is a huge deal because Blake has been pushing hard to keep everything sealed. Her team argued that these texts were irrelevant, private, and potentially damaging if taken out of context, but the court wasn't buying it. They said if Blake's communication with Taylor contains anything that sheds light on intent, retaliation, or coordination, it has to be made available. And let's be honest, if Blake was venting, strategizing, or even just gossiping about Justin or Jen Abel, it could completely shift the narrative in this case. This bombshell ruling came at the exact same time Baldoni suddenly dropped his massive $400 million countersuit. So yeah, people instantly started connecting the dots. Like, did he pull back because he knew this discovery was a game changer? Or was he clearing the legal air to zero in on Blake's alleged retaliation without the distraction of a sprawling defamation claim? And just to make the timing even messier, Ryan Reynolds, who was named in the original lawsuit, decided to speak out in an interview. Well, kind of. He didn't name names, but he made a pointed comment about integrity and people playing the victim while hiding behind clean PR. Fans were quick to assume it was aimed squarely at Justin,
Baldoni's legal team has until June 23rd to amend their claims. Meanwhile, Blake's lawyers tell ET they will be, quote, seeking attorney's fees and punitive damages against parties who perpetrated this abusive litigation.
So now you've got Blake in court fighting to contain leaks, Taylor Swift's name being dragged into legal filings, Ryan taking subtle shots in the press, and Baldoni making a major legal pivot. But that pivot, it wasn't surrender. It was a shift in strategy, and the next move he made proves it. So, just when everyone thought Justin Baldoni was gearing up for the courtroom battle of the decade, boom, he pulls the plug on his $400 million defamation countersuit. And let's be real, this move caught everyone off guard. Like, how do you go from calling out one of Hollywood's biggest A-listers and her inner circle for a calculated takedown to just letting it go? But here's the thing, this wasn't him waving the white flag. Not even close. According to legal insiders, this was a strategic retreat, not a surrender. Because behind the scenes, Justin didn't drop everything. He just refocused. Instead of chasing defamation, which can take years to prove and almost always turns into a circus, he's zeroing in on Blake's alleged misuse of the court system, discovery manipulation, and, of course, that shady subpoena filed through her shell company, Van Zandt Inc. Basically, he's cutting out the noise and going after what matters most: evidence. And let's not forget, this wasn't just about reputation damage. Justin had accused Blake's team of planting stories in the press, leaking false information to destroy his credibility, and even stealing private communications from his team. That's not just PR warfare. That's the kind of stuff that can sway judges, kill endorsement deals, and ruin careers. So yeah, he's letting go of the defamation tag. For now, but he's not backing off from the fight. In fact, with the court now allowing access to those private messages and public scrutiny on the whole shell company situation, he might have a better shot than ever at proving retaliation. And this shift also puts more pressure on Blake's team, because the narrative is changing. Instead of a he said, she said defamation mess, the spotlight is now on Blake's legal tactics. The shell company, the subpoena, the protective orders, and how all of that was used to block access to key information.
A complaint that Ms. Lively filed alleges that a retaliatory campaign was launched against her back around the time that the movie was released in August of 2024. That campaign was sort of written out in a planning document of exactly the kinds of activities and stories that would be planted about.
Legal analysts are already pointing out how rare it is to see such aggressive protective measures in a civil case like this. And the fact that the judge didn't immediately dismiss Baldoni's remaining claims, that says a lot. So while it may look like Justin's taking a step back, in reality, he's just lining up a cleaner shot. And Blake might not be ready for what's coming next. Now, if you thought things couldn't get any more twisted, just wait till you hear what's going on with Stephanie Jones. Because while Blake Lively is busy defending against retaliation claims and trying to keep her private messages sealed, Stephanie, her longtime PR powerhouse, has launched a legal side mission of her own. And it's giving total damage control. Stephanie Jones is now trying to force Meta and Pinterest to reveal the identities of people behind two expose pages, Stephanie Jones Leaks and Stephanie Jones Lies. These are basically anonymous profiles that posted claims accusing her of leaking client information to the press and spinning behind-the-scenes stories to protect certain celebrities. Sound familiar? Stephanie swears the pages are defamatory and says it's all part of a targeted smear campaign cooked up by people aligned with Justin Baldoni and PR agent Melissa Nathan. But here's where it gets tricky. Meta and Pinterest both pushed back hard on the subpoena, saying the requests are vague, overly broad, and potentially a violation of user privacy. And let's not ignore the irony here. Stephanie Jones is the same person who's being accused of sharing private phone data that allegedly came from Jen Abel's old work phone. She claims she never broke confidentiality. But that hasn't stopped critics from pointing out that sensitive info somehow made its way from her inbox to Blake's legal team, and then right into a courtroom. And now she's saying she's the victim of an online takedown campaign? Look, maybe the pages are mean-spirited. Maybe they cross a line, but they also barely had any content. A tagline here, a Pinterest post there. They weren't full-on exposés, more like digital whispers.
Ms. Lively to accuse her of weaponizing feminism, to accuse her of exploiting people, all designed to discredit her, to silence her. It was a campaign that really took a toll on Miss Lively and a number of other individuals that were really roped into this and harmed by this campaign.
And yet Stephanie is treating them like a full-blown crisis, demanding legal intervention to reveal anonymous users and possibly file suits against them. And just to spice it up even more, the two people Stephanie suspects of running the pages, they're both former PR assistants who once worked for her, then moved over to work with Melissa Nathan. And no one's confirmed anything yet. But the timing and connections are raising eyebrows all over again. So now we've got secret subpoenas, PR sabotage accusations, and a very public panic over what may or may not even qualify as defamation. And if that wasn't enough drama, just wait until you hear how this might all tie into a larger smear campaign. All right, let's talk about the part that's got everyone questioning whether this entire mess was carefully orchestrated from the beginning. Because what's coming out in these court documents feels less like a coincidence and more like a script that was written months ago. Multiple legal filings now suggest that Blake Lively, Stephanie Jones, and possibly others created a two-front legal attack. One from Blake's shell company and the other from Jones herself. And when you step back and look at the timeline, it honestly looks like they were working in tandem to make Jen Abel and Justin Baldoni look like the aggressors. Let's break it down. On one hand, you have Blake, through Vans and Inks, filing a lawsuit with no clear target but using it to pull private information from Jen's phone. On the other, Stephanie Jones, who, again, is Blake's close PR contact, files her own action accusing Jen and her team of defamation, contract breaches, and client poaching. Two lawsuits filed around the same time, both aimed at discrediting the same people, both filled with overlapping accusations, and both using almost identical language. Like, how is that not a coordinated strategy? Critics say this was designed to confuse the courts, overwhelm the defendants, and control the public narrative. Because by launching from both sides, it looks like Jen and Justin are constantly on defense, trying to clear their names while new accusations keep piling up. And then you look at the media coverage. Right after these suits were filed, articles started appearing hinting at toxic behavior, betrayal, and legal chaos on Justin's side. And they didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, some of them were reportedly linked to anonymous tips and leaks, the kind that could have come from someone in PR.
But Jake, it's no accident that they brought her into this. The scenario planning document I mentioned from August of 2024 mentions one of the things they planned to do was to plant stories discussing the weaponization of feminism, including how people in Blake Lively's circle, specifically Taylor Swift, have been accused of weaponizing feminism to bully people. This was the plan from long before there was a lawsuit.
Legal experts are now saying this tactic, filing multiple suits to look like multiple parties are affected, is a classic distraction method. You flood the court with noise so the real issue gets lost. And honestly, that strategy might have worked if people weren't paying attention. But the deeper this case goes, the more it looks like Blake and her circle might have set the whole thing in motion. And now, it's unraveling. But here's the big question. With discovery heating up and trial approaching, is there any chance the court steps in and puts a stop to all of it? Let's talk about what happens next. So, here's where things stand right now. And trust me, the next few months are going to be critical. Because even though Justin Baldoni dropped his massive defamation countersuit, the original case filed by Blake Lively is still going forward. And not only that, it's heading to trial in March 2026. That means we're not even close to done here. Right now, we're deep in the discovery phase, and things are getting heated. Blake's legal team is still working overtime to limit what can be introduced into the case, especially anything involving the shell company Vans Inc., or those confidential messages that are now being pulled into the spotlight. But with the judge allowing more transparency than expected, it's only a matter of time before key communications, like the ones between Blake and Taylor Swift, start making their way into legal arguments. And look, the timing of everything isn't doing Blake any favors. Between the court's ruling on the protective orders, the growing speculation around coordinated PR efforts, and the fact that multiple parties are now talking about legal manipulation, the narrative is shifting fast. The public, and even some legal commentators, are starting to ask, is this about defending against false accusations, or is it about burying someone before they can fight back? Meanwhile, Stephanie Jones is still fighting her own battle, trying to get Meta and Pinterest to expose anonymous critics while simultaneously distancing herself from the more controversial tactics used in the Van Zandt case. And Justin, he's no longer playing defense. Now that the countersuit is off the table, he can focus completely on flipping the narrative, using every bit of discovery to highlight what he says was a deliberate campaign to take him down. And with the court's permission to access those confidential communications, things could get real messy real fast. So yeah, this might look like a cooling down period, but anyone paying attention knows we're standing right in the eye of the storm. And as the 2026 trial date creeps closer, the stakes are getting higher, because what started as a behind-the-scenes power move is now turning into a case study in how far some people will go to control the story. But when the truth finally gets dragged into the light, who's really going to walk away clean?